This is Power 102 Digital Monday. On a Monday, Hard Talk is hosted by Karen Nunez Tesheira. We got two special guests in the persons of Christopher Jackman, Anthony Dobson. I'll allow Karen to introduce the topic and to bring on her guests. Good afternoon, Karen and gentlemen.
Good
Good
afternoon to
afternoon.
everyone. And I'm going to ask David to do what he normally does, and I'm going to do something unusual today. I thought a little bit before I go into the topic, and very happy to have you all, both of you, and say a little bit that I know of you, and you can add anything that I do not include in the conversation today. But before I do
Okay.
that, two things. One is the numbers that people can call. Um, we're very happy to hear from you, but we do understand. But we want to hear from you. This our show is about education, and and hopefully bring knowledge and information to you so that you make informed decisions and not decisions that are foisted on you or not ones that you have thought them out, whatever those decisions may be. And today, the ongoing saga, because I call it the saga of the refinery. And
Hmm.
today, before I get to introduce our guests and speak, this time, I'm really going to let them take the lead on this because I think I'm like many Trinbagonians, still befuddled, for want of a better word, um, by why was it closed down in the first place? I mean, I genuinely will ask you that. And I know I spoke to the two gentlemen, especially I spoke to Mr. Dobson. I said, when we speak about it, we're really doing it to educate the national community. This is not speaking to the converted. We are speaking to the those on the fence and those who may not even be on the fence, be on the other side. But at least be willing to hear. But before we do that, two things. One, if David, as usual, my great supporter, in every which way you can think of. If he could put up the numbers, and then I want to say something very briefly because he did call me a few minutes before the show to see whether I was going to do the show today. But go ahead,
Okay.
David.
Okay, the numbers you can contact us by are 222-8255, and our toll-free number 866-525-1099. Toll-free 866-525-1099. You can also share your comments via Facebook or YouTube as we are streaming live.
Correct. And I'm glad to see the numbers come up. Now, what I'm going to do, which was not planned at all, and I don't think even at the last minute I decided, look, let me pay homage to my sister. I hope my voice does not break, and I hope I can maintain the emotional integrity that I hope that I do have and professionalism that I like to have. But I'm one of 11, and I lost for the first time in our family. My eldest sister died a few days ago. And I just want to say just a few words about her because I think it is only right and fitting that we give Trinidad and Tobago, which I don't think she ever got. I think that was something she pined for and felt that she never really received. So I will say a little, just a few words on her behalf and on behalf of the family, the Nunez family. She's lived in the States most of her life, but she's a Caribbean person through and through. She's written, she has the, and I had to write it down. I went and looked it up so people would understand the significance of it. She went to NYU, got a PhD, a master's from New York University, but that's not the thing I'm most proud of her. She's written about 11 novels, and each of those novels have always been based on Trinidad and Tobago or the Caribbean. There's not one. She's won many awards from the New York Times awards, several awards, started the Black Writers Conference in United States. But one of the things I think I'm most proud of, and I want to pay homage to because this will be the last time that I would get that opportunity on behalf of the family, most of whom are in America at this time. She was appointed or given the designation of most distinguished professor. So I looked it up. I said, let me not just say, okay, what in heaven does that mean? Well, most distinguished professor from the City University of New York is an honor that they confer on faculty in recognition of exceptional scholarship and achievement. And receiving, my handwriting is so bad, it's a exceptional performance both at the national and international standards of excellence in her profession. And why I feel particularly proud of her is because if you go to visit that site, if you find a handful of black people, much less black women who have been given that designation, you might not go, you will not pass five. You will not pass five. Okay, so I think I've done my duty to the family. I've done my respect to my elder sister that she so richly deserved. Okay, so back to the topic, and the topic is an interesting topic for all of us, and I was glad that we are having together on the show Christopher Jackman and Anthony Dobson. I'll just say a little bit, and they can put in and help me along the way, because what really acted as the sort of the jumping off point or the trigger, so to speak, for having this discussion, quite apart from the sale of refinery and the whole bacchanal with Jinda, which we will discuss because it's all part of the whole thing. It was really the foreign exchange position and the impression that one gets that the refinery in particular, and I'll ask our guests, Christopher Jackman and Anthony Dobson, who I'm going to introduce, to explain when they say refinery and they talk about point of view what exactly it encompasses. But first of all, let me start by saying that Anthony Dobson is the branch secretary of a point of view branch of the OWTU, or Free Workers and Trade Union, who I do not think it would be what do you say, hyperbole. It would not be an exaggeration to say it is and has always been the most powerful union in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Of course, partly because it's in the energy sector, but it represents more than just the energy sector. But it has always been the most powerful and most respected. Not to say, I'm not taking away from any other union, please, I'm not taking away from them. But give Jack his jacket, as they say. Christopher Jackman is a mechanical engineer, nodding his head. He got his Bachelor of
Yeah.
Science from the University of the West Indies. That's like me, the weak person. All my education is right here in the Caribbean, right here in the Caribbean.
Yes.
The president of the Point of Pay branch of the UWTU, and was until the closure of the refinery from 2007 to November 2018, a project manager, project manager engineer number two with what was then called the Point of Pay. I think we call it the Point of Pay refinery. But
Yes.
he's also a businessman. And I don't know if he's part owner, the owner, I'm not quite sure, but recruitment experts, and they are involved in the recruiting of top level staff for firms in various areas. They're not just in the energy services and engineering, obviously, you would think that, but also in the banking and financial sector, education and training, and I could go on and on. And so these gentlemen have been kind enough to come and visit with us, because I will let them take the lead and say where did this whole um, issue regarding the foreign exchange. I know you use the Freedom of Information Act very effectively with Paria,
Yes.
um, and but we want to hear from you, and the public wants to hear from you. Let's start from the beginning with this. You can take it wherever you want to start it from, but I know the foreign exchange issue was an issue. So if you want to start there, you can start there. But we can also start with why in heaven's name the ongoing issue of why closing down the refinery in the first place. So I'd let
All
you
right.
take the lead, both yourself, Mr. Jackman, and Mr. Robson.
All right. Thank you very much. Just want to say good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago. Just to confirm, you're hearing me clearly, right?
Very clearly. Yes.
Excellent. Right. So just to correct some statements there. I
Oh,
am not an owner or partner at Recruitment Experts. I'm an employee. I'm an employee at the institution. Right. I thank God for them seeing past my Petrotrin history to give me an opportunity to work there. Right. And my time at Petrotrin, I would have functioned as you rightfully said, as an engineer too. Now onto the Petrotrin situation here. We saw it necessary, and we want to again thank you for the opportunity to keep pushing the truth out to Trinidad and Tobago. We believe this is important, and to deal with that very first question that you asked there, it is very subjective. What would have been the reason for the shutdown? We've heard multiple hypotheses from fake oil and the fiasco of fake oil. We've heard that the company was laden with debt and was a burden to the economy, right? But my opinion is neither of those were the reason. I believe that the OWTU was a very strong institution while the refinery was running, and a decision was taken based on whatever action was taken by the OWTU in the past that they needed to be cut down. They needed to be weakened because they wielded a bit too much political power. That is the only reason why I believe, honestly, that one, a decision wasn't taken to restructure the asset instead of shutting it down. And two, to this day, they are hell-bent on constantly attacking the union and bringing our reputation down further and further. But we can't allow them to do that. So that is my opinion. I just want to say that. I'm not going to give the exact occasion that I believe would have led to that decision being made, but I believe it would have been a very high-level decision taken to weaken the union. And the best way to do that would have been to shut the refinery down. So it's quite sad to see the fallout from such a decision that has not only impacted the OWTU, it would have impacted over 5,000 employees permanent. It would have impacted the surrounding institutions. It would have impacted temporary workers. It would have impacted the entirety of South Trinidad and Tobago. And to this date, we have not yet received a clear reason as to why it was shut down. Yes, they are claiming it would have been as a result of debt and as a result of the company being a burden on the state. But more so, we realize when the information is coming out that does not really seem to be the case. And we want to deal with that one by one, the reasons that they would have put forward for the closure. But before we get into that, I want to deal with the situation that you would have spoken of with respect to Forex, if you would allow me. All right? So the foreign exchange situation, is one that we believe would have already been bad even when the refinery was running, but it was made worse with the shutdown of the refinery. There's video evidence circulated now showing that the finance minister would have confirmed that the refinery was a foreign exchange earner, a net foreign exchange earner. This was said way back in 2019. And as of present, we are still reeling from the impact of the closure of the refinery and the effect that that would have had on our foreign exchange reserves. All right, so a lot of people always ask, why is the refinery considered a foreign exchange earner, a net foreign exchange earner, especially since we purchase crude in very large quantities? And to put it simply, the refinery runs on what you call a margin, which is the difference between the cost of the products that we produce less the cost of oil. So the difference between the refined products and the price of oil is what we call the refinery margin. And that is normally measured on a per barrel basis. So if you check the audited financial statements for Petrotrin before the closure, the refinery was averaging around $9.50 US per barrel profit. Now that is gross. That is the gross profit. So that will be before you deduct the cost for labor, the cost for operational expenses, the cost for loans and encumbrances. All right. So when you really look at it, on average, refineries around the world, the margin is normally consistent. All right, because the price of oil is normally consistent and the price for selling products is normally consistent. So we have refineries globally that are still being opened, refineries that are still running and making profit, good profit based on that margin. So you would have had economists in the past, numerous persons that would have picked up the argument stating that the cost of labor on the refinery was one of the major contributors of it not being profitable. All right. So, just to debunk that once and for all, we would have put out an FOIA to Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, where we would have requested a breakdown every year from the inception of Petrotrin in 1994 to the closure of Petrotrin in 2018. And we would have asked them to state clearly every year three things. One, to identify the quantity of crude that we would have imported into the refinery every year. Two, to identify the amount of taxes that Petrotrin would have paid every year from inception. And three, to identify the profit every year, year by year, that the company would have declared from its inception in 1994. That information was provided and clearly stated. That was when they were freely sharing information and not brought to the knowledge that we were collecting information to prove a point. Now, every time we submit an FOIA, they engage expensive attorneys to find reasons to avoid giving us the information. But we'll get to that at a later date, at a later time. So we have here, every year from 1994 to 2008, the company declared a profit. And not just any profit, we're talking sizable profits ranging from $41 million in 1994 to $2.4 billion in 2008. And I want to make the point here that this is not the union saying this. This is true FOIA. And these profits would have been declared even with the extensive labor force that we had in place. Every year passing. So it is disingenuous to tell the country that the labor cost is the reason for the demise of Petrotrin. All right? If that was the case, then we would have seen problems from 1994 inception to present when the staffing was around the same figure. Yes, we would have had negotiations.
Let me just say something that is supportive, of
Sure.
goes to what you're saying. Two things. Should we make a distinction between revenue and profits? Because it seems to me that when it comes to the revenue side, according to the data I have, and from Kevin Ramnarine in an article that had been written, he said we have been importing crude oil for many, many years. The heydays of 144,000. He said, in fact, the refinery was rehabilitated to accommodate 160,000 barrels per day. But most of the crude oil for many years now have been imported and refined, and then when refined, then sold. So I guess that goes to the Paria issue. But according to him, that is Mr. Ramnarine, in an article, he said in 2016, he says we have been importing it along many years. He said in 2016, we imported 1.6 barrels in crude oil, 1.6 billion. I think it's billion. I'm so bad with these things. And then in 2017, 1.7 billion. But he's also made the point. The majority of the crude oil was refined and converted into petroleum products, much of which was exported. And in fact, from what I gather, and you can confirm that, when it came to the supplementary petroleum tax, when it came to the income tax, when it came to the royalties, when it came to whatever revenue, which is what the government uses to finance its budget every year, when it comes from the revenue side of it, it seemed that Petrotrin was meeting its obligations certainly up to 2017. And they said in 2018, in quarter one, they had it wasn't a good showing, but by quarter two, according to SPA, who was an interim chairman, said that they made a significant increase because they had started the restructuring of the company. So I want to know, I mean, if a company is employing thousands of people and you have the chain, what you call the chain fence employees, as Dr. Axe mentioned. Apart from the banks and the restaurants and the businesses, and you go on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
That would then it's not just 5,000, it's thousands upon thousands of people who are getting employment indirectly from the from the refinery in its broadest terms. And you have to define refinery, because it's not just as I understand, there are three components. But if they are meeting their revenue commitments, and have met, I think it was 1 year, and they never had a subvention, and you will correct me, when they eventually, I think in 2019, got a subvention. If they're meeting their revenue, yes, you want the profits, and I understand I had some figures here that I got 43 billion between a certain period you're making a profit.
Yeah.
But it's aside the profits. If you are providing revenue, is what the government uses to run the country. Revenue is what they use to allocate to the ministries to fund the ministries. So if you are making, and you will have to correct me on that, but that's information I got. So we've been doing it for years. Ramnarayan said we've been doing it for years. We've been doing it. We have a heavy crude oil, so we'd have to do a number of things that you can explain. But what struck me when I started to do research just to prepare, I said, but if they're paying the supplemental petroleum tax, they're paying the royalties, they're paying the income tax, they're paying all the taxes that the Petroleum Act says that you're supposed to pay. So the government it's not a ward of the state. In fact, it is meeting its revenue obligations. On those revenue obligations, taxes, and on those the taxes that you are going to use to fund the running of the country for the next fiscal year. So if you've had a bad year in terms of profit, are you going to say you're going to, and I know that you will explain, I don't want to go get ahead of what you're going to say, but what I found was telling to me is that there's no question that you're not talking about the revenue. The revenue is important too. Okay, so and you were making profit. So if your test is that it wasn't making profit, was it paying its revenue? And then the subvention point, which you will explain to us. And I saw an article, I wasn't sure if it was correct, so you would need to correct it for me. Mm-hmm. But it said for most years, that's why your contingency, that is why you're not included when they talk about expenditure. I remember when I was Minister of Finance, and a former minister tried to do that, put in the contingency expense for Petrotrin in to increase the expenditure so we would look bad in terms of deficit. A highly respected economist told me you do not do that because it has because the nature of the business, that it has these sufficient assets that it can stand its own guarantor. So explain to me this thing with the revenue and the profits and the subvention and the bullet payments. Explain that, because that is what people really will believe. Sorry to say it. I know you are a union person, so as a union person, of course, people are going to say, yeah, you don't come here and talk union talk. Right? So you have to understand that, okay? You have to understand me tell you that. So I want you to say, and I know that is not a valid point, but I'm asking you to answer that part. That's what confusing me with the revenue and expenditure.
I will take pleasure in explaining as much as I can, all right? In as great detail as I can. So, when it comes to the subvention, Petrotrin would have never been subject to any sort of payment or contribution from the state, right? And we need to make that clear. That was.
And when you say subvention, what do you mean by that?
Injection of funds into the company, right, by the state. All right, so we need to make that clear. And I believe the only time the state had to intervene would have been when they closed the company and had to inject funds for payment of severance. Right, that would have been the only time, and that was also confirmed.
Right, I heard that.
Through a freedom of information request. Right, so that we can state categorically. Now, I will definitely not come here and tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago that Petrotrin did not have any issues. Right.
Right.
I can't say that. But what I can say categorically is that as of 2008, the company was on a profitable path. And then from
2008.
2009 going forward, it
It's
started
about profit, huh?
generating losses. Yes. Profit, we're talking net income. And the last profit that was declared in 2008 was in excess of $2.4 billion. Right? That is after all expenses. So what we will do.
So you contributed the revenue, you paid your revenue, and matter of fact, a major contributor to the revenue of this country. And in addition to which, you're operating, unlike many state-owned enterprises, a profit-making enterprise that has its ups and downs by virtue of the nature of the business in which you are engaged.
Yes. And to add to what you would have asked as well, and you so rightfully said, every year the company would have contributed in terms of taxes, SPT, PPT, Green Fund,
What's
VAT,
PPT? What's PPT?
royalties, production level.
What's PPT? I didn't know what a PPT is.
That is the petroleum profit tax.
Okay.
Right. So there's a full listing again. I know you would probably won't be able to see it too clear.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right? But I know that in the time of the People's Partnership, there would have been some contention about funds or taxes, there being a tax break granted by the administration back then to allow the company to breathe a bit. And we need to really explain why that happened. So as I said, up to 2008, the company was generating huge profits and paying all of their taxes.
Okay, so what went wrong then?
In 2008 and 2009, they took out two very immense loans. Right?
The bullet
one
payments.
was for $850 million.
Right.
The other was for $750 million. We're talking US dollars here.
Right.
Those two loans, from the point in time where those loans were taken out, it put the company on a path where it was extremely difficult for it to finance its yearly operations. Now, one of the then Petrotrin chairman, right? Who would have been the guy then?
Mr. Jackman, you keep him quiet, you know. You're the backup plan or what?
Andrew Jupiter. Yeah. They would have put out memos that would have circulated within the company stating that the company had to find about $1 billion a year, US dollars, to finance this debt. So I want you to have an appreciation there, where you have a company that is making about 2.4 billion TT dollars in profit, now being asked to find additional funds in the point in the value of billions of US dollars. That will obviously throw you into a loss-making position.
And there was two of them. And one was 2019 was the 750 billion bullet point, and 2022. And that was for these. Isn't that all part of, well, listen, I declare my bias.
Yeah.
I declare my bias right up front, okay? So my bias is always supporting the deceased Patrick Manning and his view. He was a visionary. He's the one that, and Malcolm Jones was the person he put in charge. And with every project, there was a problem. Everyone, the GTL, the only one that didn't have a problem seems to be the gas optimization project. From what I read,
that also had problems. Both of them.
That had problems too.
Yeah.
But what was the idea behind all of them? The ultra diesel, because those are the ones where that's where, from my understanding, the Prime Minister used that as the excuse. If I remember when he came and spoke, and by the way, I'm getting a lot of comments, and the comments are very positive in saying that they're trying to destroy. The PNM has destroyed our economy by closing down that refinery. Imagine it's taken them 6 years for a sitting member of the current administration to admit it was a disastrous mistake by his government. And they say both political parties is corrupt. Both political parties cannot be trusted without treasury. So we need to remove both of them. TTT is the largest loser for it. So you're getting a lot of positive commentary, and a lot actually on this. So so explain that bullet point that the Prime Minister, as far as I recall, he was saying, as far as I recall, looking as a citizen, not involved in any politics, as I call it,
Yeah.
sitting down and hearing him explain that Petrotrin had become a ward of the state. It was a loss making, and they had a bullet payment due coming up in 2019, another year, and it simply would not be able to make it, and it would have implications for his sovereign debt rating. And then there was another one coming up in 2022, and that for those reasons, they simply could not keep Petrotrin afloat, alive. They had to be closed down.
So
Okay,
that is good. We need to deal with that. We need to deal with that clearly. Now, clearly, very clearly. So I want to start from where you would have started with the GOP and the GTL, right? So the GTL project,
must say what I mean. A lot of people don't know what you mean by GOP and GTL. You know, I know it and you know it, but
I'll go through all of that, right? So the GTL project was a plant that the intention was to convert gas into a sort of liquid fuel, diesel, right? So GTL stands for gas to liquid. That
anything to do with crude oil? Anything to do with crude oil? Anything to do with the refinery?
No, it was a separate entity, and it was done it was planned originally on a joint venture basis, where World GTL would have worked alongside Petrotrin to construct that plant. But that was an abject disaster, right? While constructing the plant was plagued with numerous shutdowns, a lot of technical issues, and as a result, the partner would have pulled out and left Petrotrin.
And that has to also be fair too. I have to say, you know, I'm gonna have to put in. You have to correct me if I'm wrong. I know that the then government had Malcolm Jones was on their mind, not the whole board, you know, just the chairman, right? Because that's the prime minister, good friend. And what they found is they went to Credit Suisse because GTL had advocated or presented themselves to have the technical expertise, and we were to carry through with this project, which was seen to be necessary because the crude oil that we have in Trinidad and the crude oil that I understand that we refined was heavy in sulfur. And with all this renewable energy talk and all the international standard talk, you had to provide a lighter type of a renewable. This is where you wanted to go.
Low sulfur product.
Right? Am I right?
A low sulfur product. It was deemed to be a very clean diesel. Yeah.
Right.
You're on point.
Right. So this is what I understood. So because of that, my understanding, they went to arbitration in London and GTL lost. Petrotrin was unhappy. I think the Attorney General was Anand Ramlugan. They were very sad. Then GTL turned around and sued Petrotrin, and they lost again because they wanted to say that Malcolm Jones was motivated by gross misconduct that reached the level, well, I don't think they have used the word fraud, but certainly was a high level of incompetence for which they wanted to make him personally liable. And the court and arbitration in London said, far from it, it was GTL who were incompetent and incapable. Were we foolish to go and undertake that expenditure? Maybe not. Maybe we should not have. So I just want to say
that is what I want to get into. No, I'm not going into the political side of it too much, because what we can't say as well is that when the PNM came back into government, there was a matter that was thrown out of the courts, right, by the then sitting Attorney General Faris Alwari to remove liability from Malcolm Jones, right, and others, right. But I'm not going to focus on that.
And I wouldn't argue with that about it at all.
Yeah, that is not what I want the citizens to focus on today. The GTL project was about converting gas to liquid diesel. It was, and as they rightfully said, low sulfur, very clean. Whereas
the international standards requiring that from us.
Correct.
Was it not
whereas the GOP project now, which is the gasoline optimization project, also had the production of a plant, the construction of a plant that produces low sulfur diesel. So for some reason, they decided that they're going to embark on 2 projects to achieve the same output, right? And putting the company under a sort of financial burden that knowingly makes it difficult. I don't know if they believed at the time, because Malcolm Jones would have been the executive chairman. I don't know if he
Yes.
believed at the time that these 2 lines and products, once they come online, would have raised the revenue to a point to be able to finance those investments going forward.
Right.
But I still believe that that was a reckless decision. And when you look back on it, that is what would have led to the company now attaining a negative financial position going forward. So I don't know if you remember, in 2012, 2011, the oil price skyrocketed. It reached as high as about $130 a barrel, right? And in those times,
yes,
the
I remember up to 2014, up to June 2014, it was very, very high, all $100, and yes, very high.
Very, very good prices. And at that time, the refinery was also experiencing very positive margins. So you will find here, when you watch the profitability figures, in 2009 and 10, we declared losses. In 2009, we declared a loss of 900 million. Right? In 2010, we declared a loss of 150 million. Right? And in 2011 to 2013, we started to see the billions again. So because of the oil price shift, we sort of masked the impact of the loans
projects.
and those projects on the company, because we haven't seen returns on the GTL project. And it's only within 2011, 2012 that we started seeing some returns on the GOP, because the GOP really involved the construction of numerous plants and upgrades. So it brought the refinery now into a modern age where we were aspiring to meet international standards.
Right.
But with respect to the sulfur content, the ULSD plant was the most important one. And that
ultra sulfur diesel plant.
Ultra
low sulfur. Right.
Yeah. That project was also supposed to produce a low sulfur diesel that met standards. This exact same thing that the GTL
Why
project.
doing it over and over again? I think that was Samsung. I think it was Samsung. And I think, again, from what I read, they said there was no question about the technical quality, but there was the substrata, what you call the
foundation of the plant.
Foundation.
Yeah, the foundation.
Where there was the information was wrong, and therefore the whole thing was going to collapse, or something like that.
That again, we would have done our homework, and this I don't have documentary proof or evidence for to say like how we're strong on the other points with the FOIs. But what I can say is when the plant was designed, it was designed using a factor from an old code. So we have plants in the refinery that are over 60, 70 years, right?
Right.
And those would have been designed with earthquake codes that would have been from older standards.
Right.
When the ULSD plant was constructed, there was an upgrade in the codes, and we were supposed to use an improved standard. But for some reason, the old factor was used. So it's not really a case of the plant was going to fall, or that there was a major issue.
I got you.
Just designed a code that was older, but the plant withstood many earthquakes thus far we had in Trinidad and Tobago.
I understand.
The plant would have been fully hydro tested under its heaviest load conditions, and we've heard rumors about a bent beam. But if you're telling me I have one bent beam on a plant that would have gone through all of those incidents, then
so what are you saying then? What am I to take from what you're saying? I mean,
what I'm saying is that ULSD case was blown out to be a major issue when really and truly. Come again?
The bullet point payment?
No. The failure to start the plant.
Okay.
The failure to start the ULSD plant. Right? It is my opinion, and I think it is commonly accepted, that the investment in GOP was required. The refinery needed updated. So no one can argue that the GOP investment was not needed. I will probably say that the GTL project was the one that was unnecessary.
Okay.
Right? That was a brainchild that was hatched. I don't know if it was, if I don't know what the
I think
what
your
the
word
motive-
heart says it all.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
if
And
the word alone heart it's all what you want to say.
who knows? It could have benefited if it came in online. We will never know. But the reality is,
Never
it
know.
was at that point that the company took a turn for the worse. Right?
Okay, and this is the thing that people, and I think I represent people too in this, because I certainly took a back step from being involved in politics or thing. I was just reading like everybody else until recently. Okay, so I was, one of the things I know the Prime Minister said when he was in wanting to, I imagine, persuade the population that, listen, it's gone through. Point to pay, we shut down the one in Point 14, and we one refinery, and that was in Point to pay. That was the refinery. But he gave the impression that the refinery, that we in the business a long time, and the refinery is 101 years old, and it had reached its end of commercially viable days, which is very misleading.
Yes, it is.
I will let you tell me why it is, because I have the information here. But he said it was
Right.
it had come to the end, reached the end of its commercially. For the Prime Minister to say that to the country, yes, it was 100 because we're in the business since I think 1917. That's what he said. But the
Correct, that's
impression he gave you was that the whole 2,000 acres on part of which the refinery and all its other parts stood, that it was literally falling apart. Now, I want you to give us a clarification on that.
Yes, no problem at all. No problem at all. So,
Mr. Jackman, I find you saying very quiet, but you're passing the papers to Mr. Dobson or what?
I am Mr. Jackman. That is Mr. Dobson.
You're Mr. Jackman?
Yeah.
But Mr. Dobson sitting on there quiet. Anyway, you're proving on what you're saying.
Yeah, he is the guy. He's the numbers guy, so he has all the data. Right?
He clearly does.
Yeah, the refinery coming out of the GOP project,
yes,
was upgraded. New plants would have been built. We're talking about CCR, Alki. We're talking about upgrading of the FCCU, right? The CCR plant. So there was a major amount of work done to build new plants, and those plants would have been projected to go well into the history into the future of the company, right? So to say that the refinery is not viable really doesn't make sense. Now, if you throw your mind back, you would remember before the company closed, there was a lot of oil spills. There was always leaking lines, and it seemed like every year there was an issue where Gary Aboud had to come out and make a statement, and they had to do this big cleanup exercise. When the refinery is shut down and restart under Paria, the very same part that was causing the oil field, the one that you would suspect would be the one that he would complain about that was derelict, is the one that they still have running, and you're still having oil spills.
Oh, I'm surprised.
Yeah. So you ask yourself about the arguments. The arguments are not making sense. At one point in time, he came to tell the country that crude oil importing was the problem. That's the
thing. I want you to, before you go to that, let me just, because I like to give data, I'm data driven, because when I give you data, then it gives much more credibility to what one says. So, for example, when I said 101 years, I was quoting the Prime Minister, and I think he made that statement in November 2020. Okay, so that's what he said. But then the National Workers Union, they then decided to give us an update on exactly what the Point-to-Pay refinery and its grounds comprised of 2,000 acres. And he talked about things like the hospital, the golf course, and those kinds of things. Okay, well, we're not going into that. But he talked about two new 275,000 pound per hour steam boilers. He talked about a nitrogen generation facility, much of which was done between the late 1970s and after 1998. Even beyond that, upgraded refinery switchgear, new refinery lab, gas optimization project between 2006 and 2014. The cat cracker upgraded in 2014 and by Lloyd's fit for use. A unit capacity upgrade from 26,000 to 35,000 barrels per day. I can't pronounce it. Isomerization unit.
Isomerization.
Right, to produce octane light gas to compete with the premium markets. Continuous catalytic regeneration for higher yield or superior octane gasoline. And a new, I cannot pronounce it, alkylation unit. In other words, right. The reason I read out that is because I want the listeners to know that that is what the 101-year-old thing that was no longer commercially viable. These are the things that were done in order to make upgrade the refinery, not refinery, to make it profitable, to make it competitive in this new world market of renewable energy, where hydrocarbons were seeming to, Trump might bring them back again, but it seemed to be having its days were coming there, and therefore the pressure was on us to produce a lighter type of crude oil, which we do not have in Trinidad and Tobago. And so I just want people to know all the things that they said were done with the thing that 101 years old thing that was falling apart. That thing, all those things were done to that refinery that was falling apart. Okay?
Yeah.
And I got that information. So if I have said it wrong, so please, you must, when they say things to you, you must have a little bit of, something about that not sounding too right. I'm going to look it up myself. And I am not talking about the GTL, and I'm not talking about the ultra diesel. I'm talking about the things that apparently were done to improve the quality of diesel, the quality of gasoline, so that we can be more competitive on the international market. Am I right on that, Mr.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want you to go ahead and say what you will say now that I wanted to clarify the 2,000 acres. I know they have the harbor. Well, the harbor is the harbor, right?
Yeah.
And the bungalows must be in a real mess now.
Yes, they are.
Right? Okay, they are, because they haven't been taken care of. Oh, and by the way, they spend $500,000 a month since they closed it down. That came out in the papers. I'm not making it up.
Yeah.
$500,000 a month. I don't know who they're paying it to. I could kind of guess though. $500,000 a month to keep it closed.
Yeah, correct. Dobson also wants to raise a point here regarding the Prime Minister.
Just to add, good afternoon. Just to add to what you were saying, the PM would have been quite aware back in 2009. There's an article from the papers 2009 in the budget debate.
Yes.
If you throw your mind back then, he would have been fired from the cabinet, and he was a backbencher on the opposition side. And he would have stood when he was making his contribution in that budget debate. He would have given an outline all the different projects. He said, and I quote, he said, because this document, the public sector investment program, the supplement one, I was going through this document, and I must say, I was stunned because I did not understand it before. It confronted me for the first time when I read this document. He started giving the whole breakdown of the GOP project and the FCCO upgrade, all these things. So he was quite aware of it. He was aware of the money spent to upgrade these facilities in the refinery with respect to the getting your products to meet the standard.
Competitive on the international market.
Right, because January 1st, 2020, that standard was going to take effect. So therefore,
that's why he said it in November.
That's why the purpose of GOP. So he was quite aware. So for him to come and say now deliberately, now he's 100 years old, he was doing that purpose deliberately and purposely to show a narrative.
But you don't say 100, he said those are 101. And he was 101 years old. And he said it reached the end. This is the part you have to put in, there are plenty of buildings old like that, right? The Red House might be that old. Reached the end of a commercially viable days. In other words, we have no other choice but to shut it down because it's old, decrepit, and mashed up.
But at the same time, it's up for sale on the international market. Yeah? For somebody to come
that is what bothers me a lot, That's what bothers me a lot, because I honestly try to be, well, one people, I don't want to come with I declare my hand with with my view on that thing, and I agree with you. They shouldn't have pursued it. I agree with that. I wasn't defending that. What I was really defending is how they went after. Thing was so political, but let's leave that alone. And you made a good point, and I agree with you. But what I really was looking at was the rationale, and let us get to the foreign exchange issue, because let us look at how the refinery, as we understand it now, they call it Tobago Petroleum Holdings Limited. But when it was Point-to-Pay Refinery, were they made up of division, and wasn't McKinsey and another
Solomon.
Solomon and brothers, or Solomon and whatever, but they were supposed to be experts in the area to give the government then the Lashley committee guidance as to whether it made sense restructure or shut down. And there's quotation, I think I've had your David Abdullah quoted it, because he seems to have been in court today, that Mr. Esri was quoted as saying that his advice was never to shut it down, it was to restructure. And McKinsey and the other company, neither of them, I have a quotation from both of them similarly saying restructure. And in fact, Espinay said the reason why quarter 2 2018 showed a better showing than quarter 1 was because it started to put into place many of the recommendations of both of the consultants, and they were already seeing the rewards, or already seeing the consequence, the positive outcome for that. And yet a few months later you close it up. Something just not making sense. I'm telling you, this thing just don't make sense. You know, I'm saying, I know you talk about the union, but even beyond the union, it's still not making sense. So go ahead.
I can't really.
Let's go to I wanted you to deal with the Paria and the foreign exchange issue. What was your point?
Right, but yes.
You could go ahead with the point.
Right. So with respect to Paria and the foreign exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with respect to Paria and the foreign exchange, we heard from the Minister of Finance in 2019 that they had to inject $20 million a month into Paria so that Paria will be able to import fuel. Now, at that very same time, he also confirmed that the refinery was really and truly, in fact, a foreign exchange earner. What we would have discovered during our checks through FOIA is that the figure has now currently ballooned to around $50 to $55 million a month, right?
I have it right in front of me here, you know, Mr. I have it right in front of me, you know, because it's from the papers. Anthony Dobson, Mr. Dobson, you under the FOIA. They asked him if they paid royalties, and they said no.
Yeah.
And they said Paria not a net earner of foreign exchange. Paria imported in 3 months $430 million worth of fuel, much of which was used locally and some of which was sold regionally. But you also had another figure that in November 2023, you said that the OWTU yourselves, through the Freedom of Information Act, were able to determine that US $1.6 billion per annum was funding Paria's imports. So I guess what they said in November 2023, government spent over $3 billion on fuel imports between 2019 and 2022. So I guess what I am trying to understand is what was the business of Point-to-Pay Refinery, and what is the issue with the foreign exchange issue?
Right. So before, you would appreciate when the refinery was running, we would not have been purchasing completed product. We would only purchase crude, refine that, and then we will have products for our local market, and then we'll have products that we will be selling to international and regional markets. So we went from a position of being able to produce our own products for sale to now moving into a position where we are buying and reselling. Now the issue with
Using
the
a foreign exchange.
correct. Now the issue with the buying and reselling would be okay if it wasn't for the fact that we are using a significant portion of it in our local market, right? So now we are forced to put out US currency to purchase, and we are not getting equal returns when we sell. We are now losing Forex. So the company could be making profits. I don't know if they're barely breaking even or what, but the reality is we are now, with every passing year, reducing our US foreign exchange reserves because of the very nature of how they operate. Now, when the refinery was running, we purchased oil for a lower price. We refine it. We make $9 on every barrel. So we generate a significant amount of US. But for the US we generate, that more than covers the cost of the products on the local market. So the refinery model of operation was a lot more profitable in terms of generating US currency. What we have now with Paria is a consumer foreign exchange. If it wasn't for Heritage and Heritage producing Forex from the sale of oil, the situation would have been a lot worse, right? But Heritage on its own cannot buffer the loss of foreign exchange that Paria is currently generating. And that is what is now slowly leading to this hemorrhaging situation for Forex on the local market.
Okay, so let me put it simply in layman's terms, as I understood it. And as I understood what Mr. Ramnarine said, so you can correct it for me. What I understood him to be saying, because he was former Minister of Energy, he said we never went to the government to get foreign exchange. But our sale of our fuels on the regional or whatever market you sold it, because what are you? You're a refinery. So even though you were for quite a while not producing enough, and that's another thing I wanted to ask you, why wasn't there, or were there efforts to do greater exploration to increase because I know there's a lot of focus on natural gas, but if you're importing so much of the crude oil, would it be a better thing, as Heritage is doing now, exploration and drilling, would it bid out for that? But what I understood him to be saying was that the Point-a-Pair refinery, with its three divisions, one exploration and drilling, which is Heritage part, production, sorry, that's a Heritage component. The Guaracara refinery, which is refining of that crude oil, and then the Paria trading fuel, which is the refined products, aviation fuel, diesel, gasoline, much of it was used here locally, but also sold regionally, right? But I got the impression what he said, we never went to central bank for foreign exchange because we were able to generate enough foreign exchange from the sale of the fuel that we produce from the refinery in what is now called Paria. So we were not asking you for fuel. We were not asking you for foreign exchange. We had our own foreign exchange, and we used that foreign exchange to produce the fuel that we consumed locally and which we also supplied regionally. With the closure, right, so with the closure now of the refinery, you broke it up, those three divisions, you broke it up into three subsidiary companies under this holding company. And the Heritage is the part that does the exploration and production, which you all always did. That whole scandal with AV drilling. By the way, I read the papers today, and the senior counsel said, I'm not going to say anything, but even though it was reported in the papers, I'm not going to say, but her words were very scathing and very, very scathing about that report, arbitration report. But I won't go into the language that she would have used as reported in the papers. So you had that side doing that. That's the heritage, what we call heritage now. You had the Guaracara refinery refining not only the local, which had been reducing significantly over the years, and then after refining it, it would go now to the Paria side, which is the part that was marketing and selling. And now, instead of you being able to use your own foreign exchange that you would have generated from your sale of the refined fuels from your own refinery and the oil that you either got from locally or imported because of the capacity of the refinery. Now instead, you have the say like of the still is chairman of Paria saying a few years ago, I have ships outside at sea who are creditors who are saying they will not give us the fuel unless we pay them. It was 800 million TT dollars because NP, the subsidy, had not been handed over by the Minister of Finance. That was in the papers. And for the letter to have been released for the public, must have been a level of frustration that Mr. Newman George had to have felt to allow that letter to become out in the papers, to force, in my view, the Honorable Minister of Finance to hand over the money. So you reach a point, you're not only not self-sufficient in the foreign exchange, which in 2015 was 10 point something billion. Now it is 5.6 billion. And the central bank governor in May had to inject about 500 million to pull it up a little bit, right?
Correct.
To pull it up a little bit. And you now are using up hundreds of millions of dollars to bring in the fuel that the refinery, and you want to now reopen it again, not under the procurement regulator, by the way, which in itself is questionable. I do not understand. I truly do not understand what was he thinking. I know you said they wanted to break the back of the union. Maybe that might have been part of it. I'm not going to say yay or nay. I'm not a union. So I don't have those strong views about that. But there's something else. Why close it? Why? And now we have no foreign exchange. You reach a point now that you have the economists, the pundits telling us that all those, and he said he had to say a lot of the foreign exchange is loans. You know what is bonds? You know what bonds are? American dollars. When you have to pay it back, you have to pay it back in not in our money, you have to pay it back in US dollars. And you're going into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, which is an investment fund that's principally for the next generation, like in many countries in the world. And since in 2016 to December 2023, when nobody knew until a year later, by the way, they took out money, equivalent of $18.2 million. And what for? For recurrent expenditure to pay salaries, not to say, it is to me, I am flummoxed. I do not understand. There's some piece of that story that we are missing, or you can tell us. That's why I want to hear.
I just want to interject in one thing that I would have said. Right? Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I like to be very, very straightforward. I don't conceal, I don't hide. I see it as it is. Right. So, I said before, Petrotrin had its issues. And one of the challenges that the company would have experienced in the later years is that even though we had the capability to generate our Forex, we had a production problem in terms of getting products to market within a certain time. And as a result of that, what we did is that we utilized short-term loans to finance some of our purchases, right? That was one of the challenges that we experienced. And again, we have to keep in mind the company, apart from having to meet this $1 billion yearly Forex requirement, we still had to find funds now to meet our operational expenses. And that was very difficult. So I believe in the later years, 2016, 2017, 2018, they would have approached the state not for Forex, but to stand as a guarantor for some loans, for some of the short-term loans. And I know the Minister of Finance was very much aggravated by that, because you're moving from a position where under the executive chairman, Petrotrin would have managed its finances as an entity on its own, to now coming to the state for you to stand as guarantor. And his argument was that that will now cause an increase in the overall debt of the country and could potentially push us to a point. Now, all this, while I hear that argument, and while we acknowledge that Petrotrin had its issues, we have to understand why the company would have reached that situation, one. And two, that even though we were in that situation, we never defaulted on any of our financial obligations.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? When you say you, that's a very broad-based statement. What does that mean?
Yes. So the loans that were taken, the 750, yes, the debt financing was met every year. It was so good was our payment that when time came, when this guy was there, the CFO, when time came for us to face the bullet payment that was coming, that 850 million payment, he was able to engage international banks to get them to refinance that loan to avoid us having to make that bullet payment in 2019. Right? Now, while he was putting things in place to refinance that, the finance minister interjected and told him, instructed him to stop. And when that happened, immediately after, he would have submitted his resignation via a company memo that we have here. Immediately after that, while talks were ongoing about restructuring the company to keep the company afloat and implement the recommendations of the Solomon report, the Lashley report, right? I've never seen the McKinsey report, but I know McKinsey also had a part to play in the closure, so you wouldn't really hear me referring to them too much. But the recommendations in those reports were implemented in the last fiscal year, and the company declared a profit before taxes of $1.6 billion.
What? In what year?
That was 2018.
But this is not making sense. Because one of the things I did read, and I'll let you go on again, is I did read this because I always like to be careful for a number of reasons, partly being a lawyer. And also too, I'm sure they listen to what I say to see. I get my information. I try to make sure I get information from a proper source. And I think the daily newspapers, since I don't see that they were told that what they said was not true, correct, then I have to assume it was correct. I do know that when the whole negotiation with Guaracara and how they were going to allow you all not to pay the $7 million up front, how they're going to get all kinds of, it was so, it was a deal, a steal of a deal, right? I do know that it was said that it did break down because I think it was the startup cost was going to be 500 million, and also because whoever you'll tell me who it is, you'll correct me. So that one I need correction on. But that in any event, the lenders were not going to limit liability just to the refinery. It was TTPHL, the holding company, which would have included both Paria and Heritage. So that if something went wrong, it wasn't take down Guaracara and Patriots. It taken down everybody, right? But I do remember reading this when it had reached that critical inflection or point that it is reported in the papers that the Minister of Finance stated that we could have restructured the bullet payment. I remember reading that. I said, well, if he knew that he said that, we could have restructured the bullet payment. So I said to myself, but if you said you could have restructured it, he didn't give me just one statement. He did not elaborate. But if he said that he could have, now you're giving some understanding to me anyhow. If he said he could have restructured it, then why not? I don't understand something. I just don't understand.
And just to add to your confusion a bit more, when the company
Country
closed,
confusion, the country, because them
no, it is a confusing
mind-boggling.
situation, right? And when the company was closed in 2018, the very same bullet payment was refinanced.
It was
in 2019. It was correct. So that payment, that debt is now being financed by Heritage. So a decision was taken in 2017 not to refinance the bullet payment, allow the company to close, and then in 2019 they refinanced the bullet payment at a very ridiculously high interest rate to boot. Right? So,
and why you think that's so? But
well,
I mean, you can have a point of view. It doesn't have to be correct. It could just be an opinion.
This is an opinion again, and it in 2017 they didn't refinance it because it went with the narrative that there's a great debt burden coming, and this is the reason why we have to close it. I believe that was the reason why it was not refinanced in 2017, and immediately after, when the refinery was closed in 2019, it would have been refinanced and put under the responsibility of Heritage for payments going forward, which could have also been done in 2017, but that would have now led to an argument that the refinery can't stay open, right? Especially after declaring a profit in 2018 of $1.6 billion before taxes.
Right? I watched that thing and I tried to understand, because I know when the Prime Minister did it and the way he's a very good politician. There's no question about that.
Very good.
A good politician. He's an extremely good politician. Very good politician. I don't know if he's a good geologist. I think he probably is a good geologist. He went to St. Vincent and helped them out when they had their earthquake years ago. Right? That's his area. But I know he's a good politician, because a good politician has the power of persuasion and passion and all that, and he's a very intelligent man, and he understands politics, and he understands, I think so anyhow. I have that regard. I have that view of him. I think at the time, I can recall many people who don't necessarily supported the party or him was in awe of him. They said, what a brave man. He did what no one else would dare to do. And that is a man with cojones. That is a man that will stand up against a thing and shut it down and he was held in high esteem by many people. Now, I don't know. I'm listening to the whole what we do know. One of the things the Guardian report, they did a investigative report, very detailed one. They said some of the financials for some years they were not able to get them. So they could get financials, but they were unable to get financials. Now, I don't know if it's when, I think the article may have been written about a year and a half ago. I can't remember. But I do remember reading the rise and fall of Petrotrin. That was the heading. And they gave a detailed, right. And they gave a detailed story of how Petrotrin and the whole thing. And a lot of the information I did get from that article, actually. But then one of the things they said is when it came to certain years, despite efforts for them to provide financial data to see the profit and loss, to see they could not provide them with that. Okay? I am just putting forward, and it might be entirely wrong, but I'm entitled to a point of view. Right? My point of view is that maybe part of your reasoning, which I think David Abdullah expressed it equally as strongly as you did, that they wanted to bring the back of the OWTU. Yeah. If there's any truth in that, because it is the most powerful union, then the loan agreement where you're covering TTPHL, which would mean you're covering y'all, patriots. You're covering the refinery too, not just the everybody getting covered. I don't think at that point in time they wanted to do that. And so they waited it out and waited it out. And when you all were no longer in the picture, then they signed on the dotted line. I think that
a
might be
very good point.
And the reason too that I would say that, I don't think the Prime Minister will say that I'm wrong to say this. There was no love lost, and that's putting it mildly, between himself and the Prime Minister. And he may have his reasons. I wasn't there for all those years. I never got in the middle of what cockroach doing in foul business. I kept out of what was not my concern, but I was absolutely sure that there was enough ill will, bad, and being a backbench and all of that obviously spoke to that, and what the Prime Minister said in Parliament would not have helped matters. And everyone knew that Malcolm Jones grew up on the train line in San Fernando, was Mr. Mane's friend, boyhood friend from God knows when, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes people, I am not saying that in this case, because we are just trying to understand something that you can't understand, something that is not making sense, because it does not appear to make sense. Sometimes it may be emotional, personal, all kinds of things get into the mix, and you use that as an opportunity, because the bullet point thing, it fell apart. If that was the reason, that was the reason he gave. I mean, as far as I recall, he said it was falling apart, crumbling, 101 years old, everything falling apart. That was not true. So that part fall up. That's not true.
We know that for sure.
The second part,
Same thing with the crude oil.
Award of the state. That's not true. They're paying. Where how you get these revenue numbers from? You may not be making profit every year. That might be true. But guess taxes. What? Guess what? You are in a business where price and production call the shots. And guess what? We are not price makers. We are price takers. Okay? You're not producing something where you controlling the price in this vast universe. Okay? So you're already in a business. That's why you had deficit upon deficit upon deficit upon deficit, except 2022 when the Ukraine-Russian war broke out, which you could have never have known would have happened. And now you have to start back from calling Trumpian and all of continue in the future. You didn't have that crystal ball, right? And understandably. So I think there's a whole set of considerations. And the fact that you kept it alive for $500,000 a month to a place that you closed down, that you say wasn't worth anything. You let all the bungalows fall apart. I'm from the oil fields, My father was a director of Shell, So when you see me talking a little bit, they march on my father, What's his name again? What was his name? Back in the days, the big George Weeks.
George Weeks, right.
George Weeks march, and when I live in Clifton Hill, march with, I can say my father's a wolf in sheep clothing and all kind of things. So I have I am a Point Fortin girl. I grew up on the camp. I grew up in Clifton Hill. So you understand, I have there with the refinery and the tank farm and the tank and the, I know the refinery. I lived there. I grew up there as a little girl. So I probably have an affinity to it in a way maybe a lot of others may not have, okay? But having said so, it comes back to this. Let me ask you this. Two things. Now that we kind of went around it. Two things.
Yeah.
Do you believe genuinely that the Prime Minister could be justified at the time in closing? No, this is the first question. The refinery. And secondly, do you believe when you look at the cost of the US dollars to bring in the fuel, as opposed to the position where it seemed that you could have more or less paid for your fuel from your own profits, do you believe on those two grounds that the closure of the refinery, rather than a restructuring to a leaner, cleaner refinery, should have been taking the politics out of it and the union feelings out of it, the number of people employed. Marbella was turned into a ghost town. I had a Dr. Justin Ram, by the way, on the show, and his father, he said, was a cartographer. He doesn't work in Trinidad. Maybe you could be more open-minded. He works in one of the islands. But he was almost heartbroken because he grew up in Marbella, and his father worked with there. And he said, Marbella is a coast town. Do you believe that the Prime Minister truly believed that the closure of the refinery was the only option at the time for him to implement from a economic point of view? Do you believe that was the case, and also the impact on our foreign exchange, which is where the whole story started? Do you believe that it was reasonable?
How much time you give me to answer that question?
I want you to give me your genuine assessment, because people still to today have the argument, should it have been closed? And then you have this whole thing now, just before you talk, because I have to say this is a lawyer in me, with the procurement regulator, because I was in Minister of Finance when they started with the even looking at starting legislation, which was passed in 2015. But the procurement regulator, Ms. Khan, they said the Procurement Regulation Act deals with public services and public goods, mean private goods. So they had to pass an amendment to the Procurement Act on 5 of 2016 for the sale of real estate, which means Petrotrin. But why? But guess what? She's not the one reviewing the documents or doing all the oversight, because you know what they didn't pass? The regulations. But guess what? When they spend $1 million, without the permission of the regulator, he was able to quick pass it. 8 years have gone by. Something is not right. They say they consult. She said they consulted who. So that alone, and this Jindal guy putting him up and making him into, because he sit down next to King Charles III, the man is facing charges in his country.
Correct.
The man facing some serious charges for bid rigging. Don't ask. I'm not saying I look it up all the time to make sure up to date.
Yeah. So imagine
serious
that
charges of corruption. That's who you want to take over our refinery.
And that's who you meeting in private with in the diplomatic center.
And taking picture with him. And sending message when he meets with King Charles and all these dignitaries. Yeah, you have them so much in your mind. And I don't support either one. I mean, definitely, let me not get it that, because I'm not into politics. I'm definitely not on this show anyhow. Calling them louts. What are you studying them for? How you have them on your mind like that? And you are, what kind of statesman you are? No wonder your anointed one talks in the same way.
Correct.
So answer the question now, please.
It's
You're frozen. They must be freeze you. David, he frozen. David. Everybody frozen?
Hello?
Yeah. When you're frozen, okay, now we're moving.
Yeah. Can you see us?
Yeah, we see you. We want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what you really think.
Justification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is based on everything that has happened.
Where you gone? David? I didn't want me to hear his answer. David? All I seen is myself. Hello? David?
Yes, Karen. I'm right here.
Yeah, you know, he lost him. Huh?
Okay, he's here.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Like, I don't want you to talk.
That's what I was about to say.
I was in the newsroom.
That was not
We are taking right from this program.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I believe that they did not exercise all options available to them, and are going to get in trouble for saying some of these things, but it needs to be said.
Well, it's your point of
The
view.
Prime Minister is not from South. The Prime Minister is from Tobago, right? He spends most of his time up in the West, right? A decision like that would have never been
Goodwood
made.
Park now. Why don't you say Goodwood Park?
Yeah. A decision like that would have never been made by former Prime Minister Manning, because he grew up in South, and he knew the importance of Petrotrin to South Trinidad and Tobago, right? So you would have given us some experiences that you and your family would have had. And one thing that is constant with UWTU is that we are never afraid to open up and speak the truth. No matter who it is, no matter who we speaking to, we believe in being fair, and we believe in standing up for workers in Trinidad, right? But throw your mind back to an issue that would have been raised in Labrie, where the PG would have made a very strong statement to a certain entity regarding a certain facility that they were constructing, right? And because of that statement, he received a lot of criticism, when what he was really standing up for would have been to ensure that the workers would have received proper compensation for the work that they were putting out. A threat was made by persons at a multinational level to state that that they would take the business elsewhere. Now we're hearing that the business is now back here, and they are now constructing facilities again, right? And I listened to the Energy Minister make a statement today regarding that, and what he would have said is that he would have had to go back out to these entities to encourage them to come back here to do their work, right? I know that it takes a lot of courage to do what the union does. Many a times we rub people both locally and internationally the wrong way, and many a times there are consequences to some of the actions that we take in defense of the working class of this country, right? And we make no apologies for doing what we have to do. But with respect to the refinery, if this is the consequence that we have to bear for standing up for the workers in Trinidad, we will continue to do so, right? And I believe that we have sufficient evidence here before us to prove without any doubt that the refinery was a profitable entity, that the units were not derelict, that crude oil importation was not an issue, that labor was not an issue, and that the bullet payments could have been refinanced. Another untruth that is put on the market in discussions by all of these economists and so-called intelligentsia is that the refinery was a loss-making entity as compared to Trinmar, which was the profit-making side. And what I want to tell those persons is that the refinery margin would have been $9.50 US per barrel. And from that $9.50, you have deductions for labor, deductions for operations, deductions for loans. And what I'm telling those persons is that if the loan requirement was removed from the refinery would have been the most profitable sector between the two areas. So let us not underplay the important role that those two bullet payments paid towards the demise of the company. All right? And we cannot keep selling an untruth to make it seem as though the refinery was the problem without ignoring that one point. All right? So that is the truth that we want to get out here. We will be sure to share all of our information with you, because we have, I believe, Comrade Dobson would have already given you some information there already, right? But we have a lot more to share. We want you to be aware of the amount of taxes that would have been paid. We want you to be aware of profits, so that when anyone engages you, you will be able to correct them on their misinformation as well. And we will.
But that's why you are here. So that's why. So let me ask you something, because I'm going to be the devil's advocate.
Shoot.
You know, I had the figures for from the central bank. Went to the Ministry of Energy's website first. I could find hardly anything. Talking about things back from 2014. It was amusing. And they did show you the bid rounds that were very unsuccessful, whether offshore, deep round or thing, wasn't very well, trying to get foreign investors. And then when they said data, nothing available. So but the central bank did get the information from the Ministry of Finance because they did see so when I went to their schedule, right? And it showed in every area that LNG, the petrochemicals with Atlas and Titan and the methanol, the urea, the UAE, the melamine, the natural gas, we spoke about that, gone down to 2.4, 2.7, maybe at least 4.1. And the barrels of oil gone down to 47,000 barrels per day, when up to a few years, not even so far, wrote it down. But I mean, it definitely had fallen, no question about it. But it was at its lowest. All these things are at their lowest point under this current good Minister of Energy. So what I want to know, to be fair to the government, because I think I don't understand it, is regard to heritage. Heritage posted, and the Minister Young gave a very good statement, a very impressive statement, I thought, about the performance of heritage and the over 1 point something billion in profits that heritage, I think it's profits that they made. How is that profit margin going to be so high when the barrels per day has consistently declined? Is the audit? In other words, I'm trying to understand the audit, because I know audits. Is the audit a reflection of the? I'm trying to understand how Heritage did so well in the face of a declining performance in terms of exploration and development over the last, even with Touchstone and the other players, how they have done that. I just want to know, to be fair to Heritage, have they done that well? I lost them.
Yeah, you lost us. You lost us there again. It seems as though
I want you to explain really as quickly as you can, because we're running out of time. In fairness to Heritage, I couldn't understand when you're seeing from the exploration and development side of the data that the central bank provided, which you got from the Ministry of Finance. Every year there has been a reduction, a decline in the barrels per day of crude oil, gone on to something like 47,000 barrels. Really going, I mean, from the heights years ago, I mean, I'm going to those heights, but even recently. And I can't understand, if it is declining every year, how Heritage has done that well. The audit that they presented, is that audit reflective of the production levels from the company, or is that audit reflective of depreciation of assets or some other thing that you can do?
Right.
I want to be fair. I just want to be fair to the company.
Yeah, my understanding on the Heritage situation was that even though the oil prices the crude production would have dropped, right, there was some adjustment that was made to Heritage by the state that facilitated less expenditure on their end for taxes and royalties, and they benefited from that. And that showed an improved position in their financials.
So when you say a benefit from tax and royalties, what do you mean? Because I saw Paria doesn't pay royalties, and by the way, Paria is being sued, by the way.
Yeah. Paria royalties will only be from entities that really extract resources from the ground, from the state.
Okay.
Right.
So that's why Paria would not have to pay royalties, right?
Correct, because they're importing everything. Right. So Heritage has the responsibility to do so. Right. But I know that they would have received a favorable agreement between the state and Heritage that benefited them financially. I don't want to speak exactly to it. I don't want to make an error in what I'm saying, but their crude revenues would have declined because of decline in crude oil production, right? I know they are doing
and
a lot of...
oil prices didn't really go up much. Is it stayed at 70-something level? I know they do a weighted average, but it's still around that anyhow.
Yeah, so it's definitely not as a result of increased crude production.
This is,
Definitely not
that is what I know. Let me just be clear. It bothered me. I said something this math's not matching at all, at all, at all.
Yeah.
It's not this math's not matching at all. And I'm sorry to
And-
say that, but I just felt how it is, your production is lower, the price of oil, OPEC holding back on America now is the largest exporter of LNG in the world now, when it used to import a lot of LNG from us in the early days. Shale oil, and now you have Trump there is, to say, one thing you're going to try and do is to make sure that price of fuel goes down. And therefore,
correct.
you can expect, and in Europe, they're selling to Europe, and they have huge inventories they have built up after the experience with Russia and the pipeline blowing up
The Keystone pipeline.
mysteriously blowing up. So, so no, but all
Really a
joking
sad state in the world right now.
Huh?
It's really a
So, what
sad
I'm
state,
trying
and what is even more
Go ahead.
what is even more scary is that now the world has become so tumultuous,
Yes.
and we are still even more dependent on imports than we were back probably about 5-10 years ago.
That's
It's
true.
a scary thought.
I'm going to do actually, I was interviewed by things which is not the subject of this topic, I think, about the exchange rate thing. So we do talking about that today. We talked about
Okay.
crude oil. We talked about a refinery. I think you gave a good account. You talked about the foreign exchange and the freedom of information, and that in fact you were your own supplier of foreign exchange. You will not depend, but now it is they're using it up. And even if they're making money, as I see they do sell on the regional market. Most of the
Yes.
fuel is used locally, so they not using up my foreign exchange when you didn't
Correct.
used to have to do that before. And then when I
Correct.
see Heritage looking so good, sorry, Minister of Energy, but after you say Train 1 was up and running, and after you say Train 1 up and running, and after you give Mr. Warner's son, you administer in charge of quarry and mining, give him a license to go and quarry in that same Waterloo area where Frank Superstar, Justice Superstar shut it down for illegal quarrying. And a senior police officer said it's a serious issue because what they do is they process aggregate and sell it to the state. But within 2 weeks, Mr. Alan Wong, who is in the papers as the good friend of the Prime Minister, I'm not saying that, that's what the papers say. And
Correct.
you are the minister responsible for mining and quarrying. And within 2 weeks, for that same place that Justice Seepers had closed down for illegal quarrying, you gave him back a license. So you see, when you say something, I have to wonder if I have to look at it with a jaundiced eye. And when I see that information heritage, it's not that it can't be true, but the trust and confidence that's supposed to and credibility there has been so compromised in my personal view, which I am entitled to hold. When you are in person in public office, you are entitled to have fair comment. And that's my fair comment based on things that you have said. I would say that I have difficulty when I saw the performance of Heritage, and I see the decline in every single area. And the one thing you did was unitize 2, 3, and 4 because one closed down, right?
Yeah.
I
Correct.
think. All right. Well, I enjoy doing these shows, as you can clearly see.
Yes. We as well.
Yes,
This is really a nice opportunity. And again, I have to put my plug in there.
Yeah,
that,
say it. So you have 7 minutes. Take your 7 minutes.
Every political problem has a
I don't want to hear
political
Mr.
solution.
Dobson voice. I don't hear Mr. Dobson at all. Mr. Dobson, are you there? Are you not there?
I am quite present. What I will
Okay.
say, Ms. Nunez Tesheira, regarding we're talking about the foreign exchange. When the refinery was running, it have the central bank personnel from the accounting division in central bank used to be reaching out to our Petrotrin accounting personnel for the US.
Oh.
Yeah.
So when we sell our US to central bank, because we needed TT to pay the workforce, to pay bills and all this thing in TT. So the central bank used to reach out to Petrotrin accounting department for the
Imagine
US. Now is the reverse. Paria reaching out to them for the central bank. That's why last year, November, the central bank put out a report that Paria is the second single most highest entity of user of foreign exchange.
in Trinidad and Tobago.
Imagine, and he had well, I have to give Mr. Sinele that you have to give him some respect. Have to give him some respect when they take his 5 years and make it 3 years, and after they fire the former central bank governor. And don't say I'm saying, yes, they found that the dismissal was unfair dismissal, and I do not hold a brief for the former central bank governor. I don't know him. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him personally. I'm just looking at it. Where he won his case against the Minister of Finance. And of course, he followed what the Privy Council comments on the Auditor General, which I shall be speaking about in due course.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very important one.
But that's not going to change anything, you know. That's the sad thing.
What is also interesting is that regarding the 750 and the 850 million US.
Yes.
The 750 would have been that would have been May 2022.
Right.
But all along, since it was taken out in 2009, Petrotrin was servicing that loan. The balance when the company
that's the 1 billion you kept talking about. Was that the 1 billion you kept talking about?
That was the service, yes. Yeah.
That was the 1 billion a year to service.
So the balance as of November 2018 would have been $218 million US from the 750 to 218 million. So it would have been.
I mean, that is I don't know
that
what you call
that.
No, but I mean that is misleading the public because you made us believe.
Back then the narrative was 750 million and 850 million. But
not back then. I never knew they changed the narrative. Did they change it?
They still have. That's recently when the Minister of Finance put out in the papers. That was a commentary in the Newsday.
Okay.
And he spoke about it. That would have been.
So he did correct it.
The commentary was the truth about Petrotrin and its restructuring.
Yeah, but too late is the cry though.
But so they continue to, that narrative was 750 and 850, but as of November 2018, the balance would have been 218 million US.
Oh my God. But people, are you all hearing?
Yeah.
There's an FOIA that we have done in that.
I understand. You see why that is important to me. Somebody just joined us. Good evening, panel. Big up. Anyway, declared what we're saying. The governors will. You see, the reason why I wanted to have you all on the show is because I don't like the bacchanalia. See the bacchanalia? How are you helping the people of Trinidad and Tobago? I'm not going to be part of that. Yeah. I am not going to be part of that. And I don't want a guest who's part of that. I want when people finish watching the show that they have been given information, they can look at the show later on, and they can do what I do. That's the thing, the wonderful thing about the internet. You know how much information I just go on the internet and get it?
Right, correct.
You know, excuse me, people, I didn't want to interject in this highly informative program. But, I wanted to ask these gentlemen, what's the impact, or if the impact was calculated at all, as to what would have happened to effectively upsurge the operations at the Lake Asphalt facility in La Brea, because Lake Asphalt depended on flux oil that is derived from bunker fuel when you refine it and bring it to flux oil that will be mixed to the refined asphalt to produce bitumen. And now we are also importing bitumen that is of a lower quality.
Correct.
That might take a next program.
That is a whole other discussion by itself.
I tell you.
Because we have so much potholes.
It's really a sad state. But you identified it there. We used to produce the bitumen before. We imported it now. So because of the same Forex challenges that we have, there's challenges when it comes to importing the product in a reliable manner. And as a result, of course, Lake Asphalt will see pressure. Right?
Plenty.
So what is this Asphalt exporting now?
They don't export really. They're
exporting to China.
There's an agreement between Lake Asphalt and China, yes, to export pitch to China. But their main purpose really is to supply for our use within Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes,
right?
the
And
bitumen.
as it is,
But they're not doing a good job.
well, they're being cut out in terms of supply.
Supply.
Yes.
So the
But what
workers
we were
now
told by one of
come
your
again.
point 14, he was the minister in PNM government and he fall out with them. But I think he was a one time the mayor in Point 14. He was saying, and I know this is something that David feels very strongly about, and I thank him for having you all on because he got you all to come on his show. I said, I want somebody from OWTU, and he was very instrumental. And thank you, David, on the show. I want to thank you. But he said that the quality of the bitumen that we are getting is are not of the quality that we produced. And that's why it cannot stand up. And of course, they stand up to the wear and tear of the roads. And that's why some roads are just potholes upon potholes. So it's not just, as David is saying, foreign exchange issues. And I mean, misleading, I think it is misleading us because you let us down a garden path until it suited you to tell us, by the way, right? And now we know, we have spoken about this before. I have been educated by David on this bitumen before on this show.
That's good. That's not only bitumen, huh? Don't forget.
What else? What else?
The refinery produce acid, very high, very high revenue generating product, sulfuric acid.
Serious?
Yeah. That plant was also very corrosive, so it's probably rotting down right now, and that's a new plant.
But then the Prime Minister could really say it's old and it's no use anymore.
That's
Exactly.
because they shut it down.
They produced regular gasoline, which the fishermen used to use for their engines to keep the fish prices low. All right. The refinery produced, there's a whole long list. We produced sulfur that was exported to produce matches, firewoods, those kind of things.
Wow.
There was a wide cadre of products coming out of the refinery, and a lot of economists will tell you that per barrel, our crude only produced 40 to 50% usable product. That was high revenue. But they're not looking at the impact bitumen had, the impact that regular gasoline had, the impact that all these other products, that even though it may not have been high revenue, it benefited Trinidad and Tobago.
Absolutely.
Right? So you have to look at this thing holistically. And that is what we have not done. We have made a decision that impacted this country in a negative way via one person who has not yet come out and give this country a proper reason as to why it was shut down. That is what has happened.
You know what this show did? We have to end it now. But you know what this show did? I could tell you something. And I really did sit on the fence on this, because I don't like to be one of those people that, you're doing a disservice to your country, in my view, if you are going to say something because that is what the others say. You have to be independent in your thinking, right? Else you're not serving your country well. Yeah. So when we spoke about that before we came on the show, right? Because it was very important for me. And I can tell you I have learned so much from both the quiet keep on mixing them both up, mixing you all both up. But anyhow,
senior counsel.
Listen, a senior counsel, yes, that is true, Senior counsel is on his feet and junior counsel just pass the papers. So you're senior counsel for you, just in case you know that. Right. But in any case, all joking aside, this has been a fantastic program. And I think I would like to have you back sometime later on that we could really talk about what you now just mentioned about the products things that people do not know, and really does still not answer the question, why did you shut it down and now why you did. It looks the mystery, but whatever the answer you come up with is not a good answer.
We also have to emphasize and add to that part 2 of a program like this, because I really would like to have a part 2 of the effects of some of the fence line industries.
Yes, Dr. Marlene Artis, I think they invited her to speak, and she spoke on that.
As well as a social impact assessment, as how it impacted the employees and people and so.
Maybe we should really have another show.
Yes, we must.
I mean, this has been a fantastic show. Nobody here say anything negative. Everybody, when I say, well, it depends on your point of view. It depends on who.
So these guys are really
maybe Mr. Imbert might think it is negative. If they say the government has failed the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah. Agreed. And thank you
A
very
good
much.
evening. Keep the conversation of truth continue. So we have to have another second round. I'll talk to David about that, and so that we could really what I'd like you to do when we do the next round is you see how I love to use data, and it's not because I'm love data, but you see when you use data, you cannot argue with that. If I give you the data, I'm not making broad statements. If I make a broad brush statement, yeah, she's saying that, she could say what she's saying. But if I come now and back it up with data, it's very hard to say, well, but you have to be talking the truth. So it will be good if we have you all on again. I'll talk to David, and when it's convenient to you all, and to have another discussion, because there is a mystery, and the mystery has not been solved. But however I look at it, it's not giving a good picture. It's definitely not giving a good picture. But thank you very much, gentlemen. I've gone past my time. I do want
Mr. Dobson, thank you,
David.
Mr. Jackman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go on, David.
Okay.
Bye-bye,
All right.
Mr. Jackman
Take care.
and
Yes,
Mr.
fantastic
Dobson.
show. Fantastic.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
That's it for today's edition of Hot Talk. We had Mr. Dobson and Mr. Jackman of the OWTU here with Karen as